Good evening and welcome to TVB News. There was a fatal roadside accident in Chongqing this morning. 2 street cleaners died and 10 others were injured after a bus rammed into 2 vehicles parked on one side of the road. The 28-year-old bus driver was arrested on suspicion of dangerous driving causing death.
The incident involves a long-wind bus, a stationary truck and a van, which piled up on Yutong Road, a section close to the Chongqing Eastern Interchange. The front window of the double-decker was smashed, while the back of the van was damaged. Rescuers were looking for anyone trapped underneath the truck. The 2 vehicles belong to the same cleaning service company, which were static on one side of the road at the time of the incident. 6 cleaners were carrying out cleaning works in the area. Around 9 a.m. this morning, a route number E36A long-wind bus carrying some 20 passengers was traveling from Yunlong to Tongchong. When it entered the interchange, it crashed into the truck. This cleaner was performing his duty at the time and went back to the van to drink some water. He was hit in the head the moment the bus crashed into the van. Police estimated that the bus first rammed into the stationary truck before pushing it towards the van. The 64-year-old truck driver was certified dead at the scene. The other driver, a 52-year-old, was pronounced dead in hospital. Officers noted such street cleaning work requires prior applications, adding it will look into whether there were any warning signs on the road at the time. The 28-year-old bus driver was arrested. He has joined the company for 2.5 years and has been driving the route for about 2 months. Officers will look into his mental state at the time of the incident. Other cleaners and injured bus passengers were rushed to Princess Margaret Hospital and North Lantau Hospital. Under current laws, warning signs must be put up within 40 to 100 meters of the construction to remind motorists. Still, a cleaning services sector representative said there is so far no such rules related to street cleaning. A labor organization said the incident shows contractors could not fully protect the safety of the cleaners.
The city reported 15,726 new COVID cases today, slightly fewer than yesterday. Among today's tally, over 800 cases were imported. 53 infections were reported across 36 care homes for the elderly and the disabled. Almost 2,000 cases were reported from 906 schools, with 32 schools having to suspend certain classes for 5 days. 2 cases involving the XBB strain and 8 cases involving the BQ.1.1 subvariant were found. 1 BF.7 variant strain case was also reported. 32 more COVID patients died, bringing the death toll to 10,894 during the 5th wave of the pandemic. Meanwhile, the mainland logged 2,901 new locally acquired COVID cases today. Neighboring Guangdong province reported over 1,000 cases. Beijing reported 428 cases, and Chongqing logged 154 cases. Hong Kong residents using their Octopus cards to collect the consumption vouchers can get their final installment of $1,000 today. Jackie Lin reports.
At Lok Fu MTR station this morning, elderly citizens were queuing up at the kiosk to collect the last batch of consumption vouchers. But some had trouble during the process, as they hadn't finished spending the $4,000 disbursed in previous rounds. Under the scheme, residents need to use up the amount by November 30th before collecting the latest $1,000 voucher. This woman said the government should disperse the consumption vouchers in one go instead of doling them out in several rounds, which made the process too complicated for senior citizens. Some convenience stores handed out $15 cash coupons to incentivize people to collect the money from their shops. This man said he plans to buy lobsters and abalone with a cash boon for the coming Lunar New Year. Meanwhile, with the winter solstice coming next week, some restaurant owners said about 80 to 90% of their tables have been booked, and business is expected to improve by 10% than last year. As the food prices remain stable, the restaurant owner said their eatery will not ratchet up prices for their menus in case it dampens patron sentiment to dine out. Jackie Lin, TVB News.
The U.S. Senate today passed the National Defense Authorization Act 2023, authorizing a record $858 billion in military spending to fund the purchasing of weapons for Taiwan. Within a 5-year time span beginning next year, the U.S. will provide annual grants of up to $2 billion to Taiwan for military purposes. It also calls on Taiwan naval forces to participate in the Rim of the Pacific exercise in 2024. The act will now be sent to U.S. President Joe Biden for approval and will immediately take effect once he signs it. President Xi Jinping said China will make efforts to elevate global biodiversity governance to a new height. Xi made the remarks while addressing the opening ceremony of the second part of the 15th Conference of the Parties on Thursday. Speaking via video link, Xi was addressing the Convention on Biological Diversity. China has made active efforts to promote ecological progress and biodiversity protection, Xi said. He added, going forward, China will continue to advance ecological progress and plan its development in the context of promoting harmonious coexistence between man and nature. Welcome back to TVB News. Hong Kong's latest unemployment rate has dropped to 3.7%. The jobless rate between September and November was 0.1 percentage point lower than the August to October period. Employment situation improved in the consumption and tourism sectors, as well as the food and beverage and retail industries. The underemployment rate also dropped by 0.1 percentage point to 1.6%. Labour Chief Chris Sun said the labour market continued to improve, but the tightened financial conditions may partly offset the positive effects in the future. Economics professor Terence Chong of the Chinese University of Hong Kong predicts the jobless rate can return to pre-pandemic levels by the end of next year if cross-border travels with the mainland can resume over the short term. In Britain, National Health Service nurses staged a strike on Thursday, their first ever national walkout, as a bitter dispute over pay with the government rages on. This amid a nationwide wave of strikes this month, not just by nurses, but train drivers, postal workers, ambulance staff and others. British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak is planning to introduce anti-strike laws, which he says will protect lives and livelihoods. Tracy Furness has more.
An estimated 100,000 nurses across Britain are striking at 76 hospitals and health centres, cancelling an estimated 70,000 appointments, procedures and surgeries in the state-funded National Health Service, or NHS. Nurses want a pay rise of 5% over inflation, arguing they have suffered a decade of real-term cuts and that low pay leads to staff shortages and unsafe care for patients.
It hasn't been an easy choice. You enter the nursing profession because you want to help people care for people while they're unwell. But those who are unwell today, or those who are in need of care, are receiving that in the hospitals. They are staffed caring for those unwell patients.
The government say their demands equate to a 19% hike. British Healthcare Minister Steve Barclay says that there is an independent process that looks at the issues of higher taxes and cost of living with the needs of the NHS.
And that independent pay review looks at these issues, and we have accepted their recommendations in full. But we also recognise the huge contribution that we saw from nurses during the pandemic, and that's why last year we made a special case where nurses got an extra 3% when others in the public sector did not. But we've got to balance that against what is affordable to the wider economy, and asking for a 19% pay rise way above what most viewers themselves are receiving is not affordable given the many other economic pressures that we face.
Tracy Furness, TVB News.
In the U.S., national hospitalization levels for influenza in November were the highest in 10 years. This as the country ushers in the holiday season under the threat of the triple-demic. This report from NBC News.
Tonight, as Americans head into the holidays, fears that the flu is hitting harder and earlier than any time in the past decade. At Rhode Island Hospital, ER beds now 100% full. Flu hospitalizations, they're doubling in the last 2 weeks. What does the trajectory look like right now as it relates to the flu in your community and across the country?
We're seeing it about a month earlier than we have in previous years, so it is very frightening at this point in time.
The most recent CDC data shows 44 states reporting high or very high flu activity, part of a dangerous trio of viruses this winter, including COVID and RSV, a respiratory illness that impacts children, but now showing signs of easing.
Are we still facing a triple-demic where RSV, flu, and COVID are all surging at once over the holidays?
RSV nationally looks like it has clearly peaked and is on its way down. Probably the worst flu outbreak we've seen in a decade. And then we talked about COVID, where clearly it's on an upswing with increasing number of cases.
To combat COVID, the White House today is restarting its program to make available 4 free at-home COVID rapid tests per household. More free tests will also be sent to schools, community health centers, and rural health clinics. The government also increasing access to vaccines with mobile and pop-up vaccination sites. Major cities like LA and New York are recommending people once again wear masks indoors. All of it comes after President Biden declared 3 months ago that the pandemic was over.
How has that complicated the messaging to keep Americans vigilant facing COVID?
The president was also very clear that COVID is not over, and obviously we continue to see people getting infected, getting sick. Unfortunately, too many Americans needlessly dying of COVID.
Tonight, Dr. Jha is urging Americans to get the flu and updated COVID vaccines. And for those who test positive for COVID, he says, talk to your doctor about treatments like Paxlovid, especially if you're over 60.
In Malaysia, authorities scoured thick mud and downed street trees today to search for people who may still be trapped in a landslide that has killed at least 16. More than 90 people were sleeping in their tents at an organic farm in Selangor State on the outskirts of the capital Kuala Lumpur when the disaster struck. The landslide came from an estimated height of 30 meters above the campsite. Almost 400 people from several agencies have been deployed for search and rescue efforts. Officials said about 60 campers have been rescued so far. The operator reportedly ran the campsite without a license. Back locally, President of the Legislative Council, Andrew Leung, summarised LegCo's work this year in a press conference this morning. He said the Council's role in monitoring the government has not changed under the new electoral system. Mimo Sangai reports.
President of the Legislative Council, Andrew Leung, said LegCo members still came from different backgrounds and professions, making it very diverse. With the implementation of Patriots ruling Hong Kong, LegCo held 33 sessions and passed 17 bills. Leung said the diversity allowed debates to occur during the sessions. But with the number of members having increased to about 90, many members are unfamiliar to the public. Leung said that media also has a responsibility to provide greater coverage of the work done by LegCo members.
The media need also to work to report, not only those interesting subjects, but you need to report the actual work of the members. Members of the Legislative Council are working for the benefit of the people. They are not, movie stars or pop stars. They need to catch the eyes of the media.
5 anti-chamber exchange sessions have taken place since John Lee became the chief executive in July. Leung said those exchange sessions were helpful to both the government and the Legislative Council.
You have different exchanges in policy, or even the official would lobby, members that you should vote for us. Those exchanges, have a lot of, good results. I remember I had a session with the minister on plastic bag, levies. In the end, we solved the problem, and we agreed that 50 cents
Leung said he will reflect on the effectiveness and experience of the exchange sessions. He also hoped that more officials would join those sessions to communicate with LegCo members. Mimosa Nai, TVB News.
The observatory has issued a cold weather warning for the second time this week. The observatory said a strong winter monsoon will soon arrive in the coastal areas of Guangdong. This will cause the mercury to plummet to around 10 degrees Celsius on Saturday, Sunday and Monday. While the temperature in the urban areas will remain at 8 or 9 degrees Celsius, it will be a few degrees lower in the new territories. It will be a few degrees lower on Sunday. Observatory stressed people should pay attention to the wind chill effect, which rapidly draws heat away from the body, and avoid prolonged exposure to cold gusts. That's the news. Thanks for watching.